A warm welcome to you from wherever you are joining us from. We are live for you in English and in French. And for those on the Canal Sat network, you can actually choose your preferred language using the blue button on your remote control. Now, the presidents of France and Mali paid tribute on Tuesday to the role played by African troops who fought for France during World War I. It was the centenary anniversary of the First World War, and it was the first time European leaders paid huge tributes to African troops which took part in the conflict. During the war, around 30,000 Africans are said to have died fighting on the side of France alone.
The history of these soldiers is still not well known. The Senegalese skirmishers, as they are nicknamed, actually came from several countries, including Cote d'Ivoire and Mali. Some were voluntary, but others were forcefully recruited. After the war, the skirmishers received a lower pension than French soldiers. And this is an issue of discussion.
Chigozie Ubani is a public affairs analyst based in Lagos, Nigeria. He joins us now. A warm welcome to you, Chigozie. It is 100 years after the First World War. What impact do you think the First World War had on Africa?
Depending on the direction and who you are, your line of thought. For the Pan-Africanists, the partitioning of Africa has a lot of negative effects, because it further divided us and created the dichotomy, which has caused the root cause of most of the problems we are having today in Africa, from ethnic conflicts to religious conflicts and ideological conflict. Conflicts are rooted in the partitioning. So for the Pan-Africanists, it has a negative effect. And then when you look at it economically also, the effects are negative because Africa was gradually evolving. You look at places where we had developed technologically. When you look at the Nupe port, the technology of the Nupe port, for instance, it looks like a joke to the ordinary mind now, but that was our own development which would have gone at its pace. And then by the time the war came, a lot of things were destroyed, people were taken out. And don't forget that the armies, the soldiers that went to fight those wars in Burma, in Afghanistan and all that, were mostly the best that we had at that time. So they were filtered away. Many of them didn't come back alive. In fact, almost all of them didn't come back alive. So we also lost a crop of the best of our species, at the war.
Chigozie, you mentioned some of this impacts, negative impacts it's had, but do you think the role of African soldiers who fought during the war have been duly acknowledged and honored?
It depends on who you are and your line of thought. If, in terms of remembering those soldiers, there is no proper hall of fame where these individuals are remembered. And when you look at that something thousand, for God's sake, I don't think anybody would be able. So they are unknown soldiers, like we call them in Nigeria. They still remain unknown. And what have we gained by making this sacrifice? Nothing, from loans that our leaders cannot effectively deploy into development, to aid that come to us at times of conflict, when so many people have been crushed to death, for what they know not, then we get aids and relief materials. So I do not really see what we have gained for making these sacrifices. Africa is heavily indebted to the Paris Club and the World Bank and other institutions, Bretton institutions. So what really do we get except aid in times of war and conflict?
Chigozie, just as you said, the war resulted in changes that are still at the root of conflicts in many African countries today. Do you think there's been any hope for liberation of Africans?
The African man will only be liberated by we can only liberate ourselves by ourselves. The conflicts, like I said earlier, these conflicts are rooted in the partitioning of Africa. Africa was not designed to be partitioned ab initio. It had its people. When you look at certain histories, some aspects of Africa, the black man was regarded as Ethiopia, which means black. So there was no difference between Ethiopia and Eritrea. But now we have Ethiopia, we have Eritrea, the Manu region went up in flames and thousands, hundreds of thousands of people went down. These are all rooted in it. There is hope if a new crop of leaders can emerge, having seen, coming from the background, the hindsight of all that we have gone through and say we have to put a stop to this conflict and then move forward from there. But unfortunately, the kind of leaders that we have produced, because it's not like they fall from heaven, the kind of leaders that have emerged from us has not given that hope.